Hi everybody, my name is Larsen. A big part of what we consider the jazz sound is the use of chromatic passing note and chromatic enclosures. And this is of course something you want to have in your playing, and you're also going to hear it everywhere if you start checking out guitar players like Pat Martino, Tal Farlow or Pat Metheny. In this video I'm going to show you some examples of how you can use chromatic phrases. I'm of course going to show you the chromatic ideas themselves, but I'm also going to discuss how you're using them, because you can use passing note and enclosures just to add some colors in a line, but you can also use them to point toward an important target note in the next chord, or delay a chord tone in the chord that you're playing on now. And you can also use it, if you listen to people like Pat Metheny, as a way of creating some outside phrases that resolve quite nicely back into the chord. In working with these examples, I'm going to use some modal examples and also just some 2-5-1s where the chords are moving, so you can hear how they work in a tonal progression. If you want to learn more about jazz guitar, improve the way that you solo, check out some interesting arpeggios or chord voicings, then subscribe to my channel. If you want to make sure not to miss anything, then click the little bell notification icon next to the subscribe button. As you can hear, I have a cold today, so if I'm a little bit more difficult to understand than usual and I sound a little bit like then that's why. In this example, I'm using the chromatic passing notes and the chromatic enclosures just to add some color to the melody. And I think the way you should think about this is that if we have, so in this case I'm using A Dorian, and if we have sort of an A minor sound like this, then a melody that does not have any chromatic leading notes would be, and that all fits, and you can hear that I could pretty much stop anywhere and it would still work okay. But if I start using notes that are not found within the scale, then I have some notes that want to resolve. So instead of having the, if I start adding a note like on top of this chord, you can hear that it wants to resolve. And that's the kind of small tension that you can use. It just makes the melody a little bit more interesting to listen to, and it creates a little bit of tension that you then have to resolve. The first part of the example is just the arpeggio from the third of the chord. So we're on A minor and the third of the chord is a C, and the arpeggio you have there is a C major 7. So I start on the B and then I go up the arpeggio. And then I'm adding a chromatic passing note between the B and the A. So instead of just playing B to A, I just add the B flat in between. And then down the scale to G. And then the next thing that happens is that I add a complete chromatic enclosure. So the chromatic enclosure that I'm using here, this is actually one that's quite common. Well, I use it all the time, but it's also quite common with Pat Martino, because I think that's where I stole it. And that is because I'm targeting the C. So I want to play an approach to the third of the chord, the C again, just because that's a very sort of strong note to emphasize. And the way I'm doing that is I'm starting with the B, and then I'm skipping up to the scale note that's above the C, that's the D, then going down towards it with a D flat, and then back to B, and then resolving to the C. And then on the C, I'm starting another arpeggio, and because I want to have sort of the Dorian sound in there, I'm playing a C major 7 flat 5 arpeggio. So I'm playing a C, skipping up to the F sharp, and then down to E, and then ending on the B, the 9th of the chord. This example is using the chromatic phrase to give the line a little bit more forward motion and really use the chromaticism to pull towards the resolution. So it's a 2-5-1 in the key of G major, so that means that it's A minor to D7 to G major 7. And the first part of the A minor is just really an A minor 9 arpeggio, so there's nothing happening there. And a scale fragment. And then on the D7, down to the third here, so really clearly D7, spelling out that we're now changing to D7. And then down the scale, adding a chromatic passing note between the 9th and the root, which is actually similar to what I did with the A minor. And then going to the C. And here I want to resolve to the third of the G, so the G major. And the way I'm doing that, and the way I'm pulling towards it and creating a little bit of tension so that the resolution works a little bit better, is by adding this melody to it. So I'm playing the D, I'm coming out from the E to the D and then down to the C, going down below the B, so skipping down to the A and then back up chromatically, so A, and then A sharp to B, and then I'm resolving the line there. You can also use the chromatic phrases to keep the resolution really vague, or maybe even delay it a little bit, so that you don't really hear what's happening. When you expect the line to resolve, then you get some other notes that you don't really know what are there, and that way you're sort of creating something that sounds interesting and surprising to whoever's listening to the solo. That's what I'm doing in this example. It's on a 2-5-1 in G major again, so A minor, D7 to G. And the first part of the A minor line is an open voice triad from C, so the third of the chord. So first I'm starting on the E, then up to the C, and then up to the G. Then from here I'm playing an A minor triad, and then back up to the C, and then I'm playing a D7 altered. So in this case I'm really using D7 altered because that really pulls a little bit stronger to G major. So when you play D7 altered, you want to hear it resolve. And that's what I can use, because if I then delay that resolution, then the effect is a little bit stronger. So the first part is an A flat major triad, which is just a diatonic triad in D7 altered. And then we get this sort of E flat minor, sort of a stock E flat minor phrase, also kind of coming out of an E flat minor triad. And then now you would expect it to go down to the D and then just end there. So you have the, and then that's where you would expect the G to end. But instead of going to the D, I first go to a chromatic enclosure of the D. So, and then once I'm on the D on B3, I go immediately into another enclosure of the third. So I don't really resolve until one bar later. So in that way, I'm sort of really creating some tension on the D7. And then instead of really resolving it, I keep it going until I'm in the second bar of G major. If you want to check out an example of a guitar player who uses this really a lot, then you should check out Metheny on the Trio album, Question and Answer. If you listen to the solo on the song Solar, which I think is the first song on the album, then you can hear this happen quite a lot, that he'll really delay the resolution by using some chromatic phrases. But of course, you can also use chromaticism to really start to sound outside, and that's what the last two examples are on. The reason that I can keep on publishing videos every week is that I have a community of people over on Patreon that are supporting the channel. I'm very grateful for that, and I don't think it would be possible for me to continue making all these jazz guitar videos without them. If you want to help me keep making videos, then check out my Patreon page. If you join us over there, then I can also give you something in return for your support. In this example, I'm of course using a lot more chromatic enclosures and passing notes, but I'm also starting to shift small phrases out of the key, and in that way have some bigger chunks that are not in the key or not in the scale that I then need to resolve, and I can use that to create some outside sounds. So the first part of the line is really just targeting the root of the chord, so the A. I'm doing that with an enclosure that's starting below, moving up towards the A, but instead of moving directly to the A, it skips up and then starts above, and then moves from there as well. So G, G sharp, B, B flat down to, and then I'm on the A. Then an A minor 7 arpeggio in the first inversion, but descending. And then from here, another chromatic enclosure, now of the fifth, so D sharp, F to E. And then here I'm starting sort of a shifting thirds idea, and this is something you'll hear in Metheny's playing. I'm pretty sure you probably know it from him. He probably got it from Miles, and another guitar player that I also made a video on that uses this quite often is John McLaughlin. So the exact same idea of shifting a third interval in half steps like this, and then using a passing note, I resolve it to the third of the chord, the C. And of course, if you can do this with intervals, you can also do it with other structures. So in this example, I'm doing it with triads, but you can also experiment with using something like pentatonic scales or complete seventh chords. and then work with just shifting them and finding ways to resolve those lines. Now, this is easier to check out in a modal situation because there you have sort of a steady definition of what is the inside chord tones that you want to hit, and you have a lot of time to just move away and move back in. So that's why this example is also on an A minor chord. The first part of it is again just a chromatic enclosure. So I'm starting, the target note is the A, the root, and then I'm starting below with the G, and then going up to the diatonic note above, the B, and then moving from there down to the B flat and then the G sharp. And then from here I'm getting into the A minor 7 arpeggio. And actually it's an A minor 9 arpeggio in that way, that I'm moving up to the B. And then from here I'm sort of taking the top part of the chord, or the arpeggio, and turning that into an E minor triad, or thinking of it as an E minor triad, and then I'm moving that, shifting that down in half steps. So down to the D, and from here I go back up to the F, and then I'm playing a chromatic enclosure that ends on the F sharp. So in this case it's because it's A Dorian and I really want to have that A minor 13 sound, and that's why I'm targeting that note, which isn't really, of course, like a strong chord tone in A minor, but it's a very good sound to have if you want to have the Dorian sound across, to have that 13 on top of an A minor 7. If you want to check out some more videos on different ways to use chromatic passing note or chromatic enclosures, then check out this playlist where there are a few videos that are concerned with this in a bebop style, but also in a more modern or modal jazz style. If you want to learn more about jazz guitar and it's the first time you see one of my videos, then subscribe to my channel. If you want to help me keep making videos, then check out my Patreon page. That's about it for this time. Thank you for watching, and until next time.